Hey everybody, it's Brandon from the future. I have the oh so delicious timestamps here already. If you want to navigate around on this video or rewatch, jump around, however you want to do that, those are there for you. Hope you enjoy watching this video with this beast of an instrument. Looking forward to it. Hey everyone, it's Brandon, and holy shit do we have quite the video today. So whenever I decide to buy an instrument, I always have a clear-cut vision of what I want to use that instrument for at any given time. It really doesn't matter what genre of music it's going to end up being used for. But however, this is not the case with this instrument. So what in the hell exactly do I have here then? Well, for those of you who are already counting at the start of the video, this is an 8-string guitar. This is my first 8-string guitar. I've already had a 7 or gotten a 7-string. Well, let's throw on another string. So, 8-string guitar. This is made by a Chinese seller manufacturer called Zhuwei. Oddly enough, you can find tons of listings for Zhuwei guitars. But you will not find a specific brand page. Of course, with it being a Chinese manufacturer, it was made in China. I happened to buy this though from a US-based seller, so I did not have to wait an immensely long amount of time for it to arrive to me. Where I bought it from was a suburb of Los Angeles, so that was nice getting it a little early. I literally just happened to be cruising around and saying, I wonder what kind of ridiculous 8-strings are out there. And sure enough, this was out there, originally listed at $280. I actually got one of those eBay notifications from the seller saying, hey, you want to pay $266 and free shipping for it? You got it. So I was like, I'm not going to find something like that anytime soon after this. So you know what? I went ahead and got it. Again, I really don't have a use musically for this at the moment. I swear I'm going to figure something out with that. I really bought this more as a modding project at first, and then, the music piece will come down later down the line. I do think this is just too unique of an instrument. A lot of the Chinese export guitars that you see out there are really seeking to copy and, present themselves as, like Gibsons, Fenders, hell, even some Ibanez guitars, Ibanez of course being made in Japan, are just out there. They float out there, and they're again intended to be I guess sort of a lower budget alternative, although maybe not as great as what you would normally get buying an actual Gibson or Fender or Ibanez. Kind of the first thing that really struck me with this instrument once I got my hands on it was this does not feel in any sort of way, and maybe that partly is because it's an 8-string guitar, it doesn't feel like it's trying to emulate anything else. It feels like it is its own kind of unique flair instrument. I know there are plenty of videos out there of people who do take like the Chinese exports that are meant to copy a lot of the famous American brands, and they'll mod them with all sorts of new electronics and hardware and such to see if they can kick them up a notch. That's what the intention of this video is, and I'm going to be going through all of the modding that I'm going to do to this guitar to try and take it up a notch of its own, and bring it to something that I feel really comfortable putting material out there on the internet for. So to kind of give a rundown of some of the initial things that I'm going to be doing to this guitar, obviously I'm going to be putting on new strings because the strings that came stock on these are still the stock strings that you're seeing at the time of me filming this part of the video. They hold tune pretty well. They're not great. They kind of buzz a little bit, especially this low F sharp. I don't know if you can hear that well, but that low F sharp's pretty buzzy at the moment, that string. So obviously new strings, and I've got that covered, which actually is a bit of an interesting story we're going to dive into later. I am going to swap out the bridge pickup here. I'm going to swap that out to my preferred pickup of choice, which is the DiMarzio D-Activator. I'm going to swap that out, do some solder work there. The bridge of this guitar actually I like, so that's going to stay there for the moment. The electronics here don't seem to be fishy in any way thus far, so I'm going to keep that as it is. Going down to the other end of the instrument, one of the other things that I noticed right off the bat was the nut of this guitar doesn't look too great. It's kind of I don't know if they cut it weird. It looks kind of weird how it's cut, but at the same time, and just having this guitar and it just sitting around waiting for me to make this video, it's still holding F sharp standard tuning pretty damn well, so I think I'm gonna give it a shot of using this nut that came on the guitar before I decide to make any swaps to it. One of the things that I noticed right away with the nut as well, when I would slide down to the first fret of the instrument, my index finger was running into a sharp edge on the nut, which of course I did not like because it was not nice having my finger poked really hard like that. So I did end up filing that down just a tad, and that alleviated that right away. So it does feel nice to slide down on this instrument and make contact with the nut with my index finger, so that it doesn't it doesn't feel like I'm being poked really fiercely. So, and then the next piece of this is the tuners. I am taking off the stock tuners entirely. They're okay as is at the moment. And then another piece of this is with this guitar, I don't have any plans through hardware to turn it or tune it down beyond drop E. Taking the tuners out entirely, I am putting in locking tuners on this guitar. I've recently discovered the joy of locking tuners. Locking tuners are absolutely goddamn amazing. So locking tuners going on here, and that's really sort of the mods that I'm being made so far. Just some of the other observations I made about this guitar and things I've already done. First of all, this guitar is heavy AF. It's somewhere in the ballpark of 10 to 11 pounds. My scale couldn't really read it accurately. There are 2 truss rods in the neck of this guitar. This is the only instrument that I have that has that going on. Everything else I own for stringed instruments only has 1 truss rod, and so this thing is absolutely brutal when it comes to neck dive. So standing up, it's a little bit of a challenge to try and play this when it's wanting to naturally sink to the ground. So nothing really that can be done there in that regard. The locking tuners are going to add a little bit more weight to that. Second of all, with this just beast of an instrument and how heavy it is, if you sit down with this instrument the wrong way, it does not feel nice. You know what I mean when I say that. Probably the best thing I like about this instrument, I am a huge fan of the Telecaster-style body of guitars, so duh, that's what I got here. So nice to add that to the Tele family of sorts. I already have 2 6-string Teles and a 7-string Tele, so this is drawing the line on extreme or extended range extreme guitars. So because I think a 9-string, if there is a 9-string Tele out there, that's pushing it for how many strings you can do or would optimally prefer on an instrument. So 8 is a good cap, so I'm going to stick with that. And then for just 2 quick things I've already done with this guitar, I have put on a Dunlop pick holder right where I usually like to put them on my Teles, and bass even for that matter, where I can just go boop, grab a pick and be ready to rock. And then for the strap, because everything about this guitar is already extra beyond belief, I got a strap that has some pick or little pick holders built into the strap, so I can throw 3 more picks in there. So if you're gonna get an extra guitar, make it as extra as possible. Oh, and one last thing I will note, and I was actually very surprised and very impressed with, or 2 things rather. The fretwork up and down the neck on this instrument is absolutely perfect. I did not have to do any fret filing to this instrument when I got it out of the box. It felt great to hold. It actually does feel, great to hold even without the mods I've done to it yet. It is a little bit bulkier neck, of course, because it's an 8-string, but it does still feel great nonetheless to, play. Just from kind of, dicking around on it so far, it was quite a bit of a feeling to have that 8-string there and then really have to think about where I'm putting my fingers relative to everything else. Whereas my first 7-string that I got, I felt comfortable playing that right away. And then the finish of this guitar, it does have some minor questionable spots on the finish, but overall, this kind of slate gray finish, this finish was done very well. I really like how it looks. Again, not really too many places where it's not really visible, where the finish is a little meh. Great looking guitar to start off, but with the mods that I'm going to do with it and some other pieces of gear that I'm going to use in conjunction with this, I am going to get a purpose for this musically going forward. So with that, we're going to get right into doing all the mod work. Disassembly. Getting everything I wanted out of this guitar was pretty easy to start this mod project, and for the first bit of it here, I had my dad around to help for getting things started. It was a bit of a mistake to try and pull all of the stock strings out at once, as you can see, but of course after just cutting them at the bridge, they came out rather easy. I know I don't immediately take out the old humbucker pickup here, but of course that will come later with all the related wiring work. But with the old tuners removed at least, it was time to start diving into the first piece of the new hardware for this project. Tuning machines. Ahead of getting started, it was recommended to me to look into locking tuners from Spurzl in order to have a set of 8 inline tuning machines for this guitar. The set I bought came with 2 tuners specifically meant to accommodate larger string gauges up to an 80 gauge string, which more on that later. Instead of having screws that you would screw into the back of the headstock to mount the tuners to the guitar, these little Spurzl tuners had a mounting stud of sorts, which would require my dad and I to have to drill new holes into the back of the headstock in order for these to fit in.
That's where you want it?
Yeah.
Okay. See if it took. Okay, good.
And following the instructions on the packaging, we marked a closely sized drill bit off at 3/16 of an inch to mark how deep we'd need to drill into the headstock for those little studs to go in place.
Okay.
From there, using the paper punch-out that came with the packaging, I moved it over each tuning machine hole while my dad created pilot marks that I would use to drive the drill bit into. It was really easy to drill into the pilot holes and then drop the Spurzl tuners right into their slots, and then we were able to pretty much get them all lined up very evenly without any mistakes. And then we flipped the guitar over where then I screwed in the nuts to the headstock, which firmly mounted everything in place. And with that all done, it was time to move on to the next mod I had planned for this beast of an 8-string guitar. Bridge pickup. I knew from the moment I bought this guitar, I'd immediately be placing a DiMarzio D-Activator in the bridge position of this guitar. I've done 3 of these pickups in my other Telecaster guitars in the same position already, so this was gonna be a breeze. While removing the old pickup, I was pretty glad to see that how simple the cushioning under the pickup was, which would be great for dropping in the new pickup in there, and I'm a simple guy like that and like simple things. Once I opened up the electronics cavity of the guitar, I made note of where all the previous bridge pickup wires were compared to where the DiMarzio D-Activator's wiring chart says to put these things. After sliding the deactivator into its slot and pulling the wiring into the electronics cavity, I cut down the wires to size and sheared off the installation to begin soldering them to the existing controls. Like the other Telecasters I've already done this for, I've wired this humbucker in a standard series wiring. I like that DiMarzio's instructions go out of their way to let you know which particular wire you should compare to your old pickup to fit their pickups in, and additionally, this was probably the easiest deactivator I've had to set up in a guitar due to being there no extra hardware that would be in the way to have to remove. The John 5 Telecaster was not one of those times. However, I made a very dumb mistake in forgetting to solder 2 wires of the deactivator together before taping them down to not be a part of the circuit. This caused the pickup to not produce any sound at first when I just simply tapped a screwdriver against the poles to test it, but then after going back and soldering those black and white wires together and then taping them down, we were in business. For this particular deactivator, since it's the 8-string model, it actually came with a little drill bit, which I used to drill out bigger holes in the pickup or the sides of the pickups, and then screw them into the guitar. Again, very easy without all the extra hardware that could have gotten in the way. Strings. So before going into what I did for strings specifically for this mod project, I do feel it's a little necessary to explain a concept related to guitars, and that's called scale length. So scale length can be defined as the distance between the nut, which of course is at the top of your guitar, to the middle of the 12th fret, and then you double that. And especially with 8-string guitars, if you're going into the 7-string and 8-string territory, size matters. From what I found on Wikipedia, generally speaking, kind of a range of where you might find specifically 8-string guitar scale lengths is in the territory of 26.5 inches to 29. The problem with this guitar in the context of 8-string guitars is that the scale length was that of a Fender 25.5-inch scale length for typically Stratocasters and Telecasters, so obviously shorter than what we described as your typical 8-string scale length. This meant I had to think a little bit more about what string gauges to use, and so I went with a set of Ernie Ball skinny top heady bottom strings. And if you recall from the Spurzle tuners, the 7th and 8th string tuners were made to accommodate thicker string gauges, which in this case, the thickest string is an 80, so there we go. I did my usual procedure of applying mechanical penciled lead to each nut slot to allow flexibility for the strings to move in those slots. And then from there, it was a simple string up and correcting each string to tune. Again, locking tuners are awesome in that you don't have to wind your string around the string post multiple times over, which sets up for far superior tuning stability. I had a bit of a problem with that low F sharp string where it would not fit through its string ferrule at first, but then I was able to get it through without it hanging out the back of the guitar. And then from there, same thing, tuned all the strings to pitch again and then stretched them out a little bit so they would hold that tuning much easier. And then again, going low to high on an 8-string guitar, we are looking at F sharp tuning, which you see described on screen now. Conclusion. So, quick side note before the end of the video. I placed an order for Dunlop strap locks for the majority of my guitars and basses, and I installed one of them here on this 8-string guitar. And now I am free to thrash around with this guitar without having my strap fly off and ruin all the work I've done here. And that is it, everyone. I really hope you enjoyed this video, getting to dive into this. It was really fun to take this instrument for what it's worth, and actually something that was already pretty decently built, and then give it a few extra touches to give it a little leg up in how it's going to perform. I am excited to get around to figuring out what musically I could do with this. Again, having an 8-string Telecaster, I don't think I'm going to ever find one of these or anything similar in anytime soon in the near future that isn't very expensive, so I was really glad that I could get my hands on this. Of course, there might be minor changes or improvements that come down the line. I'll just have to wait and see on that and see how what I've put in now holds up. I think it's going to be a pretty good start for this guitar. I don't know if there's going to be any chance I have to play this live. We'll see, but we'll see what I can do with that if that ever arises. It'd be quite hilarious to do, to go out there on stage and bring this little beast out with me, because again, I'm not a very tall and sizable dude, so that'd be interesting for sure. And of course, if you have any questions or comments about this project, please certainly let me know. Drop comments wherever you're watching this. And at the end of the day, one thing I'm really kind of happy about with this guitar is not only is it just do I have an 8-string guitar now, I have something, if I really wanted to, I could summon demons out of the portals of hell, I mean, that's kind of what this is.
Well, it actually kind of sounds like a fun idea, now that I have the tool to do it. Let's see what kind of stuff we could do with this now.